Right, mate, thank you for coming on. I'm sure a lot of people are probably already watching, know who you are, maybe know your background, but do you want to just introduce yourself a little bit and then we'll get straight into questions?
Yeah, Stephen Fawcett. I'm currently Director of Coaching for HBO Training, founder of JST Compete, and you could probably call me a CrossFitter for the last 14 years.
Yeah.
Coach, but then also an athlete as well. Got to the games individually as a team twice and then as a master. So kind of ran through the whole the journey of getting into CrossFit, going through the CrossFit Games, and then now that's my job to coach people through that journey as well.
And we'll dive straight into that first question. How did you find the transition from athlete to sort of being a coach?
Still trying to figure it out, to be honest. No, you know, I kind of I joke about I've dived in and out of retirement like a few times, and yeah, it's something that I still actually speak to a psychologist about to try and help with that, because of how intense you have to be as an athlete is a different kind of mindset with a coach. Athlete's very kind of selfish in a way, and coach, you're like selfless. You're all for someone else. So I think that was my initial struggle with transitioning between the two, is that I go from waking up and thinking about myself to waking up and having to think about other people. I think the tough thing is that when you are an athlete and you're in an individual sport, you're in control of most stuff, whereas when you're a coach, it's the athlete that's still in control and you're less in control. So you can't have as much of a say on like how things play out on the competition floor. You just your role is a little bit removed from that. So I think those are the differences. And I think you know, I retired for 2 or 3 years and then just suddenly thought, okay, I'll do it. I'll go for it again. And then I had like another good couple of seasons, and then I'm happy to call it a day. Then I feel a bit more content calling it a day after last season.
And you're currently coaching like high level athletes, I think we spoke about before we started.
Yeah. So yeah, just like elite athletes, games level, or people are trying to get to that games level. It's quite a privileged position to be in, really.
And do you find with someone, obviously they're all striving for a similar goal, like to get to the games, are you still coaching individuals quite differently? Is it different on the way you coach one person compared to the next, if that's in regards to mentality?
Yeah, I would say so, yeah. So I have a French lad, Victor, who's an ex-gymnast, for like national level gymnast in France for 15 years, and his mentality is completely different to someone like Katrin Daver's daughter, who's also been a gymnast, but is a little bit older and has spent more time in the sport. So you just kind of got to meet. You have this like optimal like mentality you want most athletes to be geared around, but everyone also has their like individualities about how they work and what makes them tick. So it's kind of like meeting them where they're at and making sure that, you know, they are showing the qualities in terms of the mindset and the mentality that, you know, there's like a model of what they need to kind of stick to, with keeping their individual qualities as well.
Yeah, and when you're coaching these different athletes, are you constantly looking at trying to help improve the strengths, or are you always looking at improving the weaknesses? Because obviously with CrossFit, there's so much that's going on that you've got to do that.
Yeah, it's a tough one, and that is the game, really. Is you know, you do get rewarded for being really good at your strengths, so you can't just work on weaknesses. But you need to work on weaknesses, because everyone's weaknesses will get exposed in a CrossFit competition if it's, you know, structured and programmed the right way. So, that's the skill of being the coach, really, and that's always the big question, is like, what's the balance of how much time do I spend working on, like, let's say if strength is a weakness, building someone's strength up to a certain level. With that, do I then have to drop some of the engine and capacity work? How can I time it all together so that when they arrive at this competition, they're in a better place than they were previously? So like the periodization of bringing them all together. There's a lot of facets that need to kind of time together at the right time for the competition is, because we know when we get to competition, like the difference between coming 10th and 1st is, I say it, this little term is just inches. It's little inches everywhere that they need to be that 1 second or 1 kilo more here, there and everywhere, and across maybe 10 events. that's the difference between 10th and first, like these tiny little improvements.
Yeah.
So that's like what they're then continuously working on all year round for those little improvements. And then, like I said, how you then time what the strengths and the weaknesses are and how much you're working on both plays an important role then on whether they can get those inches at competition or not.
Yeah, there's a podcast, Stephen Bartlett, one that I listen to, and he talks about sweating the small stuff. So would you kind of relate it to that, where in training you are making sure you're catering for those extra inches that when you do come to competition you've nailed down and you've not left it to chance?
Yeah, exactly. And I think CrossFit's one of those sports where it's even more so the case. Like if you are someone who just like lets things slide in training, whether it's how well you move or whether you're hitting the right standards or your hydration, your nutrition, recovery, any little thing, if you're letting something slide, like it's going to affect your physical like capacity of how well you can execute or recover. So like these are things I think more so in any other sport. Let's use like darts for example, or like even football. It's more skill. There's a bit more of a skill element to it, where you can sometimes fall back on like someone's more so natural, I won't say natural ability, but someone's skill level to be able to still perform at that high level. There is skill level in CrossFit, but it comes more down to how well someone is prepared than like because everyone knows what they're doing when they go into an event.
Yeah.
In football, you don't know what's going to happen from when the ball's kicked off, so you just fall back to your level of training and the standards that you hold in training. And
you've got to just nail the basics.
You have to, yeah.
So would you say that's a massive difference from, say, the person who's been training in CrossFit now for years, who's maybe trying to strive to become that elite level athlete that you are currently coaching? Is that sort of the breaking point between those two people, or what do you see for somebody who's been perceived as an elite level athlete and then they actually go on to be someone who could potentially go into the games?
Yeah, it's so you mean someone who, like, what's the main thing that stops
like the bottleneck?
Yeah, and it's I think it's like this in any sport really, is the level of obsession that an athlete is willing to put and willing to set their lifestyle up around, like, ploughing everything into it. And don't get me wrong, I think there's people that can hold down a full-time job and go to the CrossFit Games. People are doing that. I think Pat Vellner's a great example of that. But I think he's an anomaly. Most people, just to get to that level, just to come last at the CrossFit Games, need to make it their be-all and end-all of every day of their existence during that time. So the difference between, I did an article recently on this, is the conscious decisions that they're making. I think you make something like 36,000 decisions a day or something. I'd read that or listened to a podcast somewhere on that, and it's like, it's true. Like, you have all these little conscious decisions about every little thing that you're doing, not just in your training session but out your training session, and they need to all be pointing in that direction of where you want to go. And it needs to be a conscious thought, otherwise you could miss out on this, that and the other, and before you know it, you've lost potential 5% of how you could have improved that day just from a few small decisions. So it's having that level of attention to detail, and it does have to cross the boundary of being an obsession at that point.
Yeah. And for the person who's potentially doing the 9 to 5 at the minute, are they just going to have to set realistic expectations for how fit they could possibly get in that sport?
Yeah, and I think that is a problem where people get frustrated, is that their expectations don't align with what they're willing to commit.
Yeah.
So if their expectations are to get to the games, but I'm just gonna I have a 9 till 5, and I've got kids. I'm not saying that again can't happen, because people do it, but like, realistically, if you're 2 years into CrossFit, you've got a 9 to 5, you've got kids, like, you're probably not going to CrossFit Games.
Yeah.
Unless something drastically change, and you've got a lot of that exposure to high level sports previously.
Yeah, 100%. And there's a lot of people now who potentially are becoming coaches, and they're trying to train alongside what they're doing as well. And I know that you said you're coaching the high level athletes at the minute. How do you find trying to pursue that business as much as possible, but also trying to push and being an athlete? Is that when you was like, right, I'm going to have to stop training aside in being an athlete and push more for the business? Or was that a decision that you made?
Yeah, it was. I think around 2018. I think that was when it was it was 2019. A conscious decision when I'd finished the 2019 games, and I was like, right, I owned and was working in JST Compete at the time. I was like, I built up this company to this point now, and for me to take this company any further, I have to sacrifice a few of these hours of training, a few of these hours that's currently going into training, so that I can free up more time and more mental energy to put into the business and grow it. So, yeah, it was a conscious decision at that point. And previous to that, look, I think JST Compete started in 2013, so it had 6 years of growth, and it grew to a decent size by 2019. So I could manage the two, but in order for me to take that next step, like, it needed more of my efforts.
And what
going into it
flipped that switch for you to realise that? Was there anything mentally? Was you feeling like you wasn't progressing as much with training? So I feel like a lot of people who are listening potentially trying to optimise for a successful business alongside a 9 to 5, and then they're trying to run a sub 2.5 hour marathon. Do you know what I mean? And it's not realistic.
Yeah, it's for me, it's not realistic. I'm not someone who can, if I'm going to do something, I feel like I go all in, and then it kind of, everything else takes a hit from it. That's just my kind of personality with it. And yeah, the realisation of switch for me was, it was just the position I was in my life. I was 2019, I was 30 years old, 29 years old. And I've got bills to pay. I had a mortgage, wanted to buy it. I just bought a new house, planned to have a family. And for me, CrossFit never paid the bills. I wasn't, high enough level to be getting these thousands of pounds a month sponsorship and endorsement deals. All the income that I got from CrossFit was off the back of this company that I'd created, which was off the back of my achievements as an athlete. So I had to make that decision. Is like, I can either stick and grind this out as an athlete and just be kind of like limited here in terms of my income and what else I want to do in my professional career, or make a decision to put myself more into the company, and that's what I decided at that time.
Yeah, and one of the things you touched on there is having that mentality where you're all in on one thing at one time.
Yeah.
You can imagine you was like that when you was an athlete as well.
Yeah.
Obviously, I feel like a lot of people can mention the all or nothing mentality. I've coached a couple myself with clients, and they're like, if I'm dieting, that's it. I'm not touching anything.
Yeah.
I'm not going off plan once. But if I have one biscuit, I'm off the rails and putting all that weight back on. How did you find it to say no to things when you was in that all-in mentality of like, right, I'm going to train as hard as I possibly can?
Yeah, I would just be honest. I'd set myself. My life was set up so it wasn't that hard. There wasn't temptation of going out and getting on the beers at the weekends, because I wasn't around those people that would tempt me, and I probably won't get tempted anyway. But you start, especially when I owned CrossFit JST at the time, my social group is people that are all in a similar boat. Like, everyone understands it. My family understands it. My wife understands it. Like, so I was never in that position where I would be tempted to go off on one. It's a little bit different in terms of bodybuilding. Like, I'm probably encouraged to eat biscuits as a CrossFit athlete. You know what I mean? I need to do 5,000-6,000 calories a day. So, in terms of like, it wasn't an all or nothing, as well as like, because it was just always all. Yeah. There was never a temptation of doing like nothing. And honestly, I think it's the mindset that I had to have and had to got to this point. But now I'm trying to get out of that mindset. And, like I said, working with a psychologist to allow me to have a bit better balance, a bit more of a healthy attitude towards different areas of my life. Because,
And do you find that more difficult than being all in with training?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, training was the simple life. I just needed to wake up. I'd wake up, grab my shake or whatever, head to the gym, train, have breakfast, sleep. Like, it was a simple life. I've not got to try and like do the skill run and get my 5-year-old lad ready for school, and then juggle this, and I've got someone on work that's messaging about it, and then I've got to go and train. And like, there's all these other different aspects that I need to put an equal amount of effort into each, and that is the struggle that you got to try and figure out. But I think that's just part of life, getting older, isn't it?
100%. So we'll take a dive into a different topic now, mate. Yeah. What's your thoughts on high rocks?
High rocks, yeah. I mean, I like it. I've never done one. I'd like to do, and I'd like to probably just do like a pairs one with a friend. Probably just so I can half the row, to be honest, so I'd half the row the 1,000. But okay, I've dabbled in some of the training before. I'd said to you previously, I'd gone back into playing football randomly for a season, and obviously needed to do quite a bit of running to keep fit. And I just thought mix a little bit of running with CrossFit, which it turned into high rocks training really. And I did a couple of high rock style things at the gym, just myself, and I liked it. Got really fit from it. And I think in terms of like the fitness industry, it sits in a nice position between. You've got high rocks in the middle, and then you've got CrossFit one side, and you've got Ironman the other side, where high rocks turns into the strength training for these triathletes, but it's the endurance training for CrossFit. So a lot of people can now participate in across the board. If you train in high rocks, you can arguably then go and do a triathlon, maybe not a full Ironman, but a half maybe, or go and do like a local CrossFit competition. So I think it's in a nice position in the industry. It's also could act as like that intro to get someone towards CrossFit. Don't have to go any further, and it's also a nice outro. You've seen a lot of people who feel like, I've been training CrossFit for years now, and I just want to simplify it a little bit and just make sure when I go to the gym or when I have got the time to train, I'm getting a tough workout, and I think high rocks then serves that purpose as well. So I like it. I like watching the growth of it. I think especially across Europe, seeing it go over in the US now, it'd be really interesting to see how it continues to go.
And do you feel like it's similar the way it's started off and growing the way that CrossFit did originally?
I feel like it's gone much quicker. Like it's blown up. Maybe if we were in the US when CrossFit started going, so I think it grew quite quick over there, CrossFit, and maybe we're seeing that in Europe and the UK for high rocks now, because CrossFit took a while over this side of the pond to grow. But I feel like, from what I remember 2010 time with CrossFit, this is way quicker. Like, you see in how many gyms are just affiliated high rocks in the last year. Whereas I remember it took like a few years to be able to even be within 30 minutes of a CrossFit gym. So I think it's quicker, to be honest.
Yeah. And like what you said there, with the gyms being the high rocks affiliate gyms now, do you think it'll be something that stays? Do you think it would be what people perceive as be a fad?
It's tough, innit? Like the affiliation thing. I don't know too much about the structure of it because, I think it's tough because what are they affiliating to? Because it's running, and it's simple exercises in the gym, and I think that's the identity of it. I don't know what you get from that affiliation other than being able to, similar to CrossFit, being able to say that you're running a high rocks class. Is there a difference to an engine class that you could just call it? So I don't necessarily know what you get from an affiliation. Maybe you know. So I don't know.
I don't.
I don't know what the draw is into.
I think
that
it's potentially kit, and you get like access to tickets for competitions and things from what I've heard.
Okay. Yeah. I guess we'll see. Yeah.
Time will tell.
Yeah.
But we may see you doing a high rocks in the future.
Might do one. Yeah. Look, I got a couple of mates who, my mate Sean, who's Lancaster way. Like, we've spoke about doing it. Doing one. It's just you have to be quick, don't you, with the sign up to get a ticket. Maybe I'll drop into one like last minute. You see people selling the ticket like a week before because for whatever reason. So maybe that'll be my
Well, speaking about those people who sell the ticket the week before, do you feel like a lot of people jump onto doing a CrossFit competition, high rocks competition, thinking they can just do it, but they don't realise what it actually takes?
I'm not sure about high rocks. Maybe you know that. I feel like high rocks though, it's like if you can run, you can do it.
Yeah, you can finish the race.
It's 8k run. It's a decent distance, split into 1k each time, so it makes it a little bit more. Feels like it's a bit more achievable to be able to do. And you're never coming up against something you can't do. Do you know what I mean? Whereas you sign up to a CrossFit competition, you have to qualify for them usually, so you have to hit a certain level, unless you just go into a local competition. But there's quite often something that you just can't do. So I think that holds people back from entering CrossFit competitions. I think that's the main the main like positive of High Rocks is that most people, if you've done a bit of running, you can just join, you can go and do one. You can't really do that with CrossFit competitions.
Yeah, it's so true, because there's so many different things that you have to train for, and that goes back to what we were saying at the start. Like with the person who's got the 9 to 5, they need to understand that there's so much out there that they might need to train for. If they wanted to get to that CrossFit Games, that they need to set realistic expectations on where they compete, type of thing. If you was to change the way potentially CrossFit was brought up as a sport, would there be anything that you'd change?
Yeah, how long have you got? Yeah, look, I think hindsight is always, what they say, hindsight is always 20/20 vision, isn't it? And we can point the finger and say, oh, they should have done this, that, and the other. You know, and I think a lot of the changes that we've seen happen in the last 6 years have been financially driven, because they've not been making a profit from it. But I think if we go back to any time between 2013 and 2018, we saw a season that was consistent every single year, and it was growing. It was growing in momentum, building momentum, and then it changed suddenly in 2019. And from that point, it's not really found this consistent good way of doing it. In my opinion, how it was ran in 2018 and previous was how it should continue. They should have just thought of better ways to monetize it in a way where it can be profitable. Rather than just suddenly like just completely going to throw it all up in the air and change how it's how you qualify for it. Watching a CrossFit competition itself is quite confusing for someone who's never seen it before. Of like, well, what's happening, what they're doing, or how, you know, what does this competition mean? So, but it gained a bit of momentum as to making that a bit clearer. Yeah. And then they just threw it up in the air in 2019. So yeah, I think just going back to, and it has gone back to what it was then, but there's still talk about changing bits here, there, and the other. So, you know, I think just need to look at other sports. They need to pay more attention on other sports. Like CrossFit's been around for less than 20 years, so it's a really young sport, and you know, you can kind of, people forget that. I think you look at football or any other American sport, has been around hundreds of years, to the point where, again, football again, where we got the Champions League, you got the FA Cup, you got the Premier League, you got Carabao Cup, you've got all of these different, and everyone understands what most people understand, like how you qualify for each and what the process is, and then there's 4 different things going on there. I know there's a discussion of players playing too many games now, but like they've took that much time to, like, that hasn't always been the case, to develop this perfect way of running that sport, and it's took hundreds of years. CrossFit's 20 years old, and they try to figure it out. You know, there's other events companies that are running CrossFit events, that are trying to like lead the way as well. But you know, what the best way going forward for it is, I actually don't know.
Don't know. Yeah, yeah. Well, there's like you said, there's so much going on in the sport that sometimes I feel like you said, there's the person who's watching. I used to watch on Amazon Prime the documentaries, and they were unreal. But like you said, there's sometimes where, as the viewer who's trying to get into the sport, you may not actually know what's going on. Whereas obviously with football, you're just looking at the score in the top right corner, and it can be difficult.
Those documentaries though, like the amount of people that I've met and said, oh, I started going to CrossFit because I saw those Netflix documentaries. 2018, they fired all the media staff. Yeah. So they could no longer create these documentaries. Oh, wow. And do you know what I mean? It's like that was a big thing. The amount of people that found out what CrossFit was. How many times you sit down on the couch in the evening and go, let's find something on Netflix. Yeah. And then you look at CrossFit and go, that looks pretty like interesting. Let's watch it. That put many eyes on CrossFit, which is then gonna, you know, snowball this monetizing and this profit that they're trying to build. And then the first thing they've done is they've made cuts on media team in 2019, and it's took all that away. And I think that was the start of it being just confused in where it was going.
Yeah, because I feel like personally, this is from my own experience, I've never stepped foot into a CrossFit gym and actually gone to compete type of thing, but it's always sometimes gets a bad rep when really it's meant. I think it's a great sport, and obviously it's always had the rep that it's more prone to injury, and there's, you know, you've got to do too many different things at once, and the kip and pull up sort of thing. But when you actually look at it as a sport, and you've, like you said, you've watched those Netflix documentaries, you go into the gym and you actually get used to it, you're going to enjoy it. I'm imagining the first ever person who played football hundreds of years ago. What's he doing, kicking a ball about on a field? You know what I mean?
The first person that picked it up and tried to throw it.
Literally. So one thing I was going to touch on as well was, what was your thought on the recent event with the triathlon? With the
fucking hell. The games.
Yeah, the games.
Yeah, so I was there watching it all, and with a friend of mine, and seen it happening. So it was a strange one, because you see these people that are coming in. They set off on the run. You don't see them because they run around this lake, and then you're not even seeing them when they're swimming in the lake, unless you're on the live stream with some drone footage, until they're getting like 50 meters from the floor, from the exit of the water. And then you can start seeing them come in, and you think, these first people coming in out of the water, these are obviously the strongest swimmers. And there's people going off in one direction, like complete opposite way. Then there's breaststroke, which turns out to be it was Lazar, and Steve Winrow, who I was with, actually was like, it looks like he's struggling, this fella. He's like, he's front of the pack. Like, he's probably just like, he realises he's ahead of other people for a bit. He's probably just taking it easy and getting a few breaths, and just spending time like spotting. And then you think nothing of it, like, for the next 20 or 30 minutes, until every athlete has crossed over the finish line, and then word starts getting round that, you know, he's not come out of the water, and then it just turns into like, it's just a blur from that point on, really. But yeah, my opinion on what has happened is, I think, I'm not sure if you know about the PFA. Do you know about the PFA? It's a Professional Fitness Athletes Association. Yeah. They've been pushing for years for better safety procedures, because, you know, quite often we've been in a CrossFit Games event where the safety and the health and well-being of athlete has been at risk to protect maybe like the unknown and unknowable element, or it's felt a little bit more previously like you're exposed to these things because, you know, if you were in the Marines, you'd be exposed to these things, and they have to deal with it, so you should as well. Is that kind of mentality? Whereas like, that's not why we're getting into this. We're getting into this to see who's the fittest, not who can like react in the most extreme like circumstances. I think this was just like the final straw of like many different events which could have gone that way. I think 2015 was a good example, when people are doing Murph in the middle of the day in LA, in California heat, and there's people like passing out, there's people getting heat exhaustion, like there's that double figures worth of elite athletes that are struggling like with their health at that point. And, you know, my experience from that event was, I sweat a lot, when I train, and I'd gone through all of my water that I was allowed to take out with me within the first 15 minutes of the event. It was that hot, and I'm on the floor doing 200 push-ups, heat bounding up after me, and I was getting to the point where, you know, you're getting dehydrated, and like it starts like homing in,
the walls closing in.
Your vision's homing in. I said to my judge, who's a nice fella, I said, look, there's water at the end of my lane, like 50 metres away. I need to get some of that water because I'm not feeling like too good. And he was like, you can't leave your lane. So I was like, right, I just carried on going. I got onto my squats, just carried on going, and it was getting worse. I said, look, I need some of that water. I said, can you go and get me some, and I'll just stand here? And he said, no. I said, you can go and get some water, but it'll be a medical withdrawal from the competition, for the whole competition, the whole week. This whole competition that I trained years to get to. And the only time I could get that water was when I finished these 300 squats, and I could pick one up on my way out for the next run. So it was kind of like that, and that message was said across other athletes, and it was said the judges had been pre-told that message. So it was kind of like it's that mentality of like, you've got to do what do what you're told. And I think that mentality, that cultural mentality within like a lot of the CrossFit Games staff at that point, is if you think about what potentially that lifeguard, I don't know if the lifeguard or volunteer, that's all what's up in the air, has been told. If a athlete takes help from that lifeguard in the water, they're getting withdrawn from the event. So is their lifeguard going to be a little bit hesitant to jump in and help this person? You know, these are all the little things, and this is, like I said, this is a cultural problem that's developed over the last decade of CrossFit, because I feel like it's not, they've not had the athletes' health and well-being at the forefront of the priority.
Yeah.
And I think this is unfortunately just this final, hopefully it's the final thing that's happened, which has gone in the worst possible way, that it's ended up killing potentially one of the fittest men in the world.
Yeah. And like you said, when you're going back to when you was saying with was it Murph, the session that you was doing in the heat, you physically can't even train for that. Like, not having the water or being outside in the blistering heat. And I can imagine it was kind of a similar thing where obviously you get to a point of, like you said, potentially with the Marine or the person who's training to be a Navy SEAL, there's being the fittest person in the world, and then there's just obviously pushing yourself to that no days off mentality. You might have seen David Goggins on TikTok and things and stuff like that, but it's completely different.
It is. And like that Murph, that workout Murph, I'm not sure if you know the reason behind it. Have you watched...
I never actually know that. Is it to do with Marines?
Yeah, so hero workouts are created in memory of someone who's died, in memorial of someone who's died in the war, or in some an ex-forces person most of the time. And Murph, what's the name of the film? I've watched it so many times. Lone Survivor. There you go.
Yeah.
Lone Survivor.
Do
you remember his name? Someone Murph. Mark Murph. Who is it?
I
can't remember. Mike Murphy.
Chris, absolute legend.
He's got Wikipedia.
We need to get him a mic.
Yeah, exactly. So it's in memory of him.
Yeah.
And if you've watched that film, sick film, but like what he went through in that period where he died, with like how rough, like running away from like the Taliban and all of that happened in that film. It almost felt as if like that's why those rules were created around the water, because he didn't have any water. He was like left out to try and survive.
Yeah.
And it was almost like they're trying to mimic that amongst us, you know. And it's like, if I wanted that, I'd have gone through and signed up to the Marines when I was 18 years old, but it's not what I wanted.
Yeah.
I wanted to try and, you know, become the fittest person I could and compete in his fitness competition instead. So yeah, it definitely felt like, and yeah, look, Dave Castro is the director of competition, and he is an ex-Navy SEALs.
Yeah.
So there is like that mindset carrying over, and I get that there's the big draw around like having an element of that mindset, making it like a bit more hardcore and extreme, but the boundary is when it's the athletes.
Yeah, you can only push it so far.
Well-being, yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, thank you for that, mate. We'll take a swerve away from that topic now, and we'll go more back into you yourself as an individual. One of the things we touched on was like the all-in mentality, and we spoke about how you're now trying to come out of that through what you're going through right now. How do you feel like you developed the all-in mentality to start with? Was that something that was just always there, or...?
Yeah, I do definitely. I don't think it was always there, because I do think it generally just developed over time. I think, just to give a little bit of background, like when I was younger, I was all in with sport as a general. Like I played a lot of different sports, but I was never like, I only play football. Like, and I would play football 4 or 5 times a week. I would do football, do hockey, I'd do table tennis, swimming, cross country, running, like any sport that was played at school. Cricket, I was in the team to play it, and I just loved all sports. And then it was when I started CrossFit, because it was quite consuming. I was like, I can't play other sports here because I'm getting really sore and tired of this CrossFit, and I'm like really enjoying it. So, and you don't really have the when you're in school, it's easy to go and play a different sport. You just join the team, or you go to after school club. When you're an adult, it's not the same kind of accessibility, is it? So, but you can just go to the gym quite easily, and I can look up this workout and I can do it.
Yeah.
And I think as I progressed through like going this small competition, got good results, and then you'd leave that, a bit like how you leave like a high rocks now, and you're like,
your times,
right, well I need to improve on these lunges, these were like my slowest bit, so I'm going to put more effort into these bits, and you get that, and then when you come to the next competition and you see like that payoff, he's like, then it starts giving you like that bit more encouragement to take it that little bit further. And I think that's where it developed, is it just kind of going, I remember every time I'd do a competition, I'd get my notes out on my phone and I'd write down like what were the main areas that held me back from the guys that beat me, and I'd lay them down as like, I would then make sure that I addressed them. And the further you go through that kind of like that journey where like you do a competition and you debrief how you've done, the things that you need to work on get smaller and smaller. The detail of it goes more into the details of what you're doing and how you're living, rather than like what exercises I need to do more of. And the more you get into that, the more it just starts progressively like taking over, and I got the best results as an athlete, the best time of my career, when it was the be all and end all of my life.
And
so
that goes back to perfecting those like inches that you spoke about with that elite level athlete. And it's almost like a self-assessment after every single session. Do you feel like that's kind of you being a perfectionist, or is that just you wanting to strive for more and be better at that one thing?
Yeah, I think the latter. I think the feeling of working hard at something and then like getting the they say hard work pays off, what they say, and working hard at something and it paying off. That was the addiction for me, really. It was like, I know like, I think I'd probably been conditioned, like I know that this is going to be hard, conditioned when I was younger, but I always remember my dad actually took me out when I was younger. He'd be on his bike and I'd go on the Morecambe Promenade, and we're doing like fartlek. Do you know fartlek training? Like lamppost to lamppost.
Yeah.
And he was like, I know this is hard, but when you get on your rugby pitch and play, like, you'll be way fitter than everyone else. I remember stepping on a rugby pitch and I was just like everywhere, and it was like, I think that was my first taste of like that kind of like commitment to this thing that's not enjoyable or is like really tough, paying off in the best way possible, like when it matters in the match. And I think that's what I just became addicted to. To be honest. Yeah,
'cause I think it's so much easier now for people to be not striving for things that are hard to then get the payoff afterwards. It's like you could be comfortable earning a good wage, not feel the need to train, and just like plod along and live a good life. But it's also so much easier to get amongst different like training regimes or work towards a goal, like we said, like high rocks, CrossFit, Ironman. If you want to play football, be an athlete in whatever it is, it's a lot easier to pick something up now, and there's so much more out there. So do you feel like a lot more people are starting to understand that they have to put that hard work in to see the payoff?
I still feel like there's a big gap in people. I think people's understanding and appreciation of what needs to happen to get to those like heights is, some people get it, but a lot of people still don't, I think. I think maybe what's different in more recent times is like the accessibility to go and compete in a CrossFit competition is way easier than it was 10 years ago, because of the amount of competitions there are now and how they need to make it a profitable business, so they need to lower the barrier of entry, and they can kind of get that buzz from a competition. High Rock's a perfect example. Like you go with minimal experience, really, as long as you can run half decent, and you can get that experience, and get that buzz. Whereas previously, you had to work really hard to get to that level,
into the competition,
because there wasn't that many of them around, and the barrier to entry was higher. So maybe that's taken away people's appreciation of what it needs to be to get to top level, because they can kind of get that feeling on a different level without as much commitment.
Yeah, it's almost like the young lad on the football team at high school who one of the mates is got a trial at an academy, and you know you're going to have to graft every single Sunday to try and get scouted. Similar sort of thing. I completely agree, because I feel like there's a lot more people who seem to be training and taking up different sports at the minute, but there's a massive difference between the people who are performing in those sports the best and the people who, like you said, are just at that entry level, who are just doing it to kind of complete the race or just join the competition.
Yeah, exactly.
100%. So would you say hard work's paid off?
Would I say?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy with how things are now. 36 and a decent job where can earn well and support my family. Have relative flexibility with come and doing a podcast 10 a.m. on a Thursday. Is it Thursday? Thursday morning. Don't know what day it is like, but yeah, I think like keeping a balance of like social life. To me, if like living a successful life is being able to have balance and having like being able to have the flexibility to go and see some friends and not successful isn't just around like the money you earn. I feel like I'm in that position now where kind of keeping a good balance of it all. Yeah. And to me, that means that the hard work where I definitely did not have that balance previously, is paying off, but it doesn't ever really stop me from keeping going. Yeah, there's always another thing on the
one
horizon.
of the things you touched on there was like there wasn't as much downtime like you spoke about, to be fair, previously, of potentially going out with friends and getting on the beers, etc. And I think there's a lot of people who potentially going for the entry level in these competitions who think they have this work-life balance. What's your thoughts on that? Do you think it needs to be, if you want to be very, very successful, there has to be more sacrifice?
Depends what your definition of success is, isn't it?
Yeah.
What is that level of success? Because it's different to everyone, and a lot of people and quite shouldn't be like turned nose part. Success is just being able to be fit enough to go and do a high rocks every month or so, or every couple of months, while still being happy to train with friends and working a decent job. Yeah. That's success for most people. It's, and like I said before, like your commitment and your behaviours then just need to align with what will make that happen. Mm-hmm. If you're saying success is getting to High Rocks World Champs, or what do they call it, Elite 15, I'm presuming, I don't know the level that you need to get to there, what type of splits they're running each 1K at, but I'm presuming it's pretty fast. And that's going to take quite a lot of commitment. And a lot of time spent on your feet putting the miles in. So yeah, it's just aligning what you class as success and what you're willing to put in to get that success.
And that's something we've spoke about loads in this podcast, and I think a lot of people need to ask themselves that question as well, is like, what do you define as your own success sort of thing, and not trying to be successful based off what somebody else has achieved. And having to sit with yourself and thinking, right, I want to do, like you just broke it down perfectly, I want to be able to potentially do a high rocks race or a CrossFit competition locally, still be able to be fit and train with friends and still work successfully in my 9 to 5, or still push this business that I'm trying to grow. And it's having that, like you said, bringing up the self-assessment and the debrief of what's going well. Is work life taking a hit because I'm training too much? Do I need to balance that? Am I earning enough money through training and my own business that I can leave work? Yeah, okay, right, I'm going to push that business. And it's kind of the whole self-assessment thing that you spoke about. If you was to have that self-assessment yourself and go back in time, in hindsight, like we've spoken about, potentially for the CrossFit Games, where would you put more time and effort into? Or if there was another Steve who's about to enter the CrossFit Games, what would you tell him?
What I would teach myself is... So I struggled post 2015 games with like knowing what was next, because I'd achieved what my main achievement was. So it would be to retrain like a bit of perspective around like about the journey, and not just have it like I didn't care what came after the games, and I was like, because I'm just gonna train towards this. And that wasn't a healthy way to go, because then it happens and you just sat there like, whoa, this happened, and it wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be, and now I'm like, well, what am I doing? So more just help me like think a little bit more longer term on next steps. But honestly, I think, that being said, I'm really happy with a lot of the decisions and a lot of stuff that I did. I don't think I wasn't around many people in the UK anyway that was going to that extent to do what I need to do, and I think I took some bold moves and bold decisions, and yeah, proud of doing them.
Yeah, 100%. You should be. How did you find that with, obviously, like you said, in the UK and it being more popular, potentially over in the US, of you pushing at that level and there not being many people?
I think it's still a motivation of mine. It's something that I'm passionate about. Is that it's always like there's always like a UK versus US thing, isn't it? Ryder Cup and all that stuff. And I work with a lot. I'm the only British out in an American company now, so it's quite entertaining. But I'm always passionate about helping the European side of things, especially the UK side of things, on what we can do to improve that. So yeah, at the time, I felt like I was flying the flag for the UK and trying to help push Europe, and that was what a lot of my motivation was around JST Compete, is to help bring athletes through on that side of things, to bring the UK scene up. And I honestly think the UK scene right now isn't in as good a place as it was 7 to 10 years ago. In terms of the amount of athletes that were coming through. I think it's getting slightly better in the last couple of years, but I think we're behind a lot of countries in Europe, and still behind the US, so it'll always be
Why do you think that is?
So I think we're behind the US because I think CrossFit is the dropout. It's always been jokes as it's your dropout sport. A lot of the time it's been your dropout sport. So anyone who's tried to be a professional in another sport and hasn't quite made it, like, they probably can be quite good at CrossFit because of the age of what CrossFit is at that time. It was being quite young. A little bit like when Hyrox first came around. Like, you could get a lot of CrossFitters who weren't amazing at CrossFit but could go and win world champs in Hyrox. It's not the case now. But with it being established in America, and then the American sports all being like strength and power based, with your American football and baseball and ice hockey and basketball, everything's much more geared around strength and power, and a lot of the training that those athletes had done to get good at those sports was strength and conditioning. It was Olympic lifts, it was squatting, it was being strong. Now if we go into the UK, what was your strength and conditioning as a football player when you were growing up?
We're going to the boxing gym.
You do star jumps, you do sit-ups, you do doggies of a football pitch, suicide sprint, we call them doggies. You'd just be running up and down a football pitch. So if you ever look now at a CrossFit competition, and this is still the case, usually the first events are more endurance-based. And you see European flags at the top. And then as soon as it goes to a strength-based event, you see American flags at the top. Now it's evening out a bit. You're starting to get people like strong athletes in Europe getting up in there in the strength events, and more endurance athletes. But historically, like, that's been the case, and I think it comes from like how people have fallen into CrossFit, what backgrounds they've got from the previous sports, which are that are in that culture of that country. So yeah, I think that's why it's been behind, because CrossFit does typically lead more into that strength and power with how strong and explosive and fast you need to be. Like I said, that being said, now it is evening out. And the longer CrossFit goes, the more you would have to have done CrossFit longer, rather than just being an ex-pro rugby player and then at 24 deciding you're going to do CrossFit, and at 28 you're at CrossFit Games. It's not going to be the case for much longer.
100%. And for the person who's listening, who's pushing to be an athlete in whatever it is that they're doing, just before we wrap this up, what would you say is the main thing that they aren't prioritising as much, that you would say they should put more effort into? Obviously, I know it's probably person dependent, but as a whole, what do you think people don't prioritise when it comes to training?
Just any sport. It's a tough one, isn't it? Like I say, it's person dependent. There's quite a lot of context needed on it, but for me, a lot of it was how I live my lifestyle around training.
Right. Yeah.
I think everyone trains hard. A lot of people train hard these days. It's not like people need to try harder in the gym. It's what you're doing outside of the gym which is going to support better performance in the gym, or in the sport that you're playing. I think Marcus Rashford is an example. You see he's gone through. He said or I don't know if anyone follows football. Eric Ten Hag had come out and said that it was his life outside of the gym last season, which was leading to his poor performances that hadn't been as good as the previous years. And he said he's fixed that, and then he's recently started playing a bit better. And I think that's just a prime example of, like, if you are trying to be a sports person at that top level, you have to gear your life around it to support it, because the margins are only getting finer and the level's only getting higher.
Yeah.
So, like, people are going to make those sacrifices, and if you don't, then you're not going to hit that level. If that's the level you want to get to, then you have to make those decisions.
100%, mate. And that wraps up this episode. Thank you so much for coming on.
No problem.
For anyone who's potentially looking to follow yourself or coaching with yourself, where would they go to?
Follow me. Instagram is StevieF22. Coaching, the program I run is HPO Pro, which is just for, like, competitive athletes, really. Quite, 2, 3, 4 hours a day's worth of training. So hpotraining.com. You'll see the pro program on there. And you have to drop me a DM if you need coaching, but pretty full up.
No worries at all. Well, thank you everyone who has listened and tuned in. If you've got any questions regarding this episode, you can drop me a DM as well. All the Steve stuff that he's mentioned will be in the description, so you can find it there. Subscribe, follow. Please make sure you do that, and we'll catch you in the next one.